Adam Smith versus Karl Marx. This could quickly turn into a debate between the ideas of capitalism and the ideas of socialism, or the ideas of capitalism and the radical version of socialism, Marxism, or it even could turn into a debate between capitalism and communism, which derived from Marxism. Although these philosophers varied greatly in their ideas and philosophies, without them the Industrial Revolution would not have been what it is, and it would not have the effect today without them. Adam Smith. Adam Smith was born on June 17, 1723, in Scotland. He was a professor at the University of Glasgow, and he wrote the book, The Wealth of Nations. In this book, he defended the ideas of a free market, free economy, and the three natural laws. Smith was a firm believer in laissez-faire economics, and he also thought that economic liberty would result in economic progress. At the core of Adam Smith's laissez-faire capitalist philosophies lies the three natural laws of economics. Law 1 is the law of self-interest. Law number 2 is the law of competition. And law number 3 is the law of supply and demand. Law number 1 of Smith's natural laws is the law of self-interest. This question is asked almost every day by most people around the world. The question is, why work? Why spend 8 to 12 hours every day working? The answer for most people is you or your family. Why do you go to school? To get an education, which will most likely lead to a better life, with more money, more food, and more luxuries such as vacations, electronics, and a better house for you and your family. Law number 2 of Smith's natural laws is the law of competition. A small family-owned shop opens up on a street with some other surrounding small shops around it. Unlike the other shops, this one sells dressers. We will call this store store number 1. Store 1 has one worker, and they can make one dresser in the average of 3 months. So in January, a customer comes and takes away the dresser. Another customer comes and they order another dresser. And in April, the customer comes back and takes their dresser that they ordered. Business is going great for store number 1. However, in May, another store selling the same dressers opens up just down the street. We will call this store store number 2. In July, store number 2 releases a dresser while store number 1 is still out of stock. Store number 2 continues to make dressers, and instead of waiting, one customer comes and takes them all at once. This causes store number 1 to make a better product. This causes store number 2 to make a better product, and they keep enhancing their products as the need for business increases. This turns into something like a game for the businesses. One store releases a product, the next store tops that, and the next store tops that. The more businesses there are, the more competition is created. Ultimately, this competition creates a better product. Law number 3 of Smith's natural laws is the law of supply and demand. The economy always has and always will be dependent on supply and demand. A dresser factory will always sell dressers, but it will be dependent on the supply and demand on how it will sell with the public. Supply meaning how many could be made with the resources that they have, and demand meaning the popularity that this product has in public. If the supply is low and the demand is low, the cost will stay constant, meaning no fluctuations, and it will cost to make the product, but not many will be made. When the supply is low and the demand is high, it will cost to make the product, and it will be very expensive to buy it. When the supply is high and the demand is low, it will cost little to make the product, and it will not be expensive to buy. When the supply happens to be high and the demand happens to be high, this is where Smith's third law takes action. Smith believed that enough goods would be made at a low price in order to keep up with the high demand. When the supply was high and the demand was high, this caused the economy to rise, and it makes money. A dresser factory can only make one dresser per every day. However, the demand for these dressers becomes very high in a short period of time. This relatively slow rate causes the public to be angry with the factory because they want more dressers. However, the factory can only make so many at a time. This causes the factory to change their ways, so the 1 per day quota is now turned into a dresser every hour. At the basis of all Adam Smith's beliefs lies a strong belief in laissez-faire economics. Laissez-faire basically means to have the government leave you alone. They thought that the nations did not grow wealthy from tariffs. Rather, free trade caused nations to grow wealthy. Free trade is trade with no regulation and no government interaction. They thought that free trade would boost the economy and would make a lot of money. A combination of Smith, Malthus, and Ricardo created a new way of thinking called capitalism. This new way of thinking thought that companies should be private and that the sole reason to invest money was to create profits. Thomas Malthus thought that the population was increasing at a faster rate than the actual food supply was. He also thought that people will always be poor if once poor. David Ricardo also thought that once you are poor, you will always be poor. He also thought that if there was a high number of workers and a high number of resources, the product will be cheap. However, if there's a low number of workers and a low number of resources, it will be expensive. Karl Marx was born May 5, 1818 in Germany. Coming from him came the philosophy of Marxism, which was really just a more radical version of socialism. In his book, The Communist Manifesto, he expressed his thoughts in the problems that he saw in the capitalist system. In his book, he discussed the problems with permanent social classes, and he also discussed how the poor will suffer because they will always be poor. He thought that human society always has been and always will be derived of social classes, and that these social classes will be permanent. He thought that once poor, you will always be poor. In the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx explained his views on social classes. He thought that social classes are permanent. Before the Industrial Revolution, he had workers on the bottom, the bourgeoisie or the middle class in the middle, and then wealthy on top. After the Industrial Revolution, he thought that the workers were going to be on the bottom, the middle class in the middle, and wealthy on the top. However, he had a gap between the wealthy and the rest. He thought that the wealthy were going to grow even wealthier, and that the poor were going to grow even poorer. With the distribution of money with extremely wealthy on the right and the extremely poor on the left. Before the Industrial Revolution, Marx thought that the wealthy, the middle class, and the poor were relatively close to one another based on the distribution of wealth. However, after the Industrial Revolution, he thought that the wealthy would grow extremely wealthy, the poor would grow extremely poor, and the middle class would lose some of their wealth as well. The poor worked in terrible conditions, and Marx thought that this would cause the poor, which was the majority of the population, to overthrow the factories. How Marx saw the future. Marx thought that the capitalist system was going to destroy itself. He thought that the factories were going to end up competing against the small family-owned businesses. While a small family-owned business can make one dresser, in the same time, a factory can make many different dressers of many different designs. Marx thought that this would completely destroy all family-owned businesses. He thought that all of the artisans would disappear. Marx thought that the wealth was going to be held in factories and manufacturers. He thought that because of this, the people would revolt. People would want their money, their power, and their equality back. He thought that because of this, everything would be shared, everyone shared, and everyone's profits would share. This would cause complete equality. The government would be held in the people. This new society would now become social class free. Marx described this point as a state of communism. Marx's stage of pure communism. Marx considered this stage the last phase in turning the society into complete socialism. In this phase, everything is owned by the people. Private property would cease to exist. All land would become owned by the people. All factory, mines, railroads, and businesses would also become owned by the people. All food and goods would become shared equally among all. There were very few immediate reactions to Marx's The Communist Manifesto. However, by the turn of the century, Marx's ideas of communism had spread all the way around the world. Marx's ideas of communism caused explosive results worldwide. His ideas affected many countries, including Russia's Lenin, China's Mao Zedong, and Cuba's Fidel Castro. Were Marx's predictions right or wrong? For the most part, they were wrong. Marx thought that economic forces determined and predicted the outcome of society. Turns out there are many factors, including religion, nationalism, ethnic loyalties, and a desire for democratic reforms. Also, Marx thought that the gap between the rich and poor would grow immensely. The gap actually did not grow because the government had enforced many new reforms that would prevent this from happening. Although the ideas of these philosophers varied greatly, our society would not be what it is without them.